Arms control has not received a lot of attention in the current presidential campaign, and I think that's a mistake because there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity to use arms control, and you do arms control not because arms control is fun. You do it because it's a tool that advances American security. And I'll give you several reasons why arms control could make America and Americans safer. First of all, even after the New START treaty is fully implemented, the Russians are going to have about 2,000 nuclear weapons that could target the United States. We're better off if that number could be brought down. Further arms control could also get into the question of non-strategic or tactical nuclear weapons, where the Russians have thousands of weapons that are not constrained at all. So that's one reason. Another reason is that over the next several years, the United States is going to have to make decisions about replacing different parts of its strategic forces, new ballistic missile submarines, new heavy bombers, and these are going to be decisions that will cost tens of billions of dollars. If we can achieve another arms control agreement that brings force levels down, we're going to save money because we won't have to build so much in the future. And that money can go either to reducing the government deficit, or it can go to funding military operations that are going to be far more likely for the U.S. military than thermonuclear war. And a third reason, or another reason for going down the route of arms control is today the United States and Russia between them control about 95% of the nuclear weapons in the world. If the United States and Russia are not reducing their stockpiles, they don't have a lot of credibility to ask other countries not to build up or not to acquire nuclear weapons. So if the United States is going forward and trying to further reduce its nuclear arsenal, it's going to be better placed diplomatically to urge countries not to acquire nuclear weapons. That won't solve the problem of North Korea or Iran, but it will make it easier for American diplomacy to get help from third countries to sanction and pressure those countries not to go down the nuclear route. After ratification by both the United States and Russia, the treaty came into effect in February of 2011. So the sides are now in the process of implementing the New START treaty. They're conducting inspections. Each side's allowed to conduct 18 inspections a year. That process is going, by all accounts, very smoothly. And they're exchanging all of the notifications that the treaty requires. So literally there have been thousands of notifications exchanged now regarding changes in strategic forces, regarding inspection procedures and such. And by both accounts, from both sides, the treaty seems to be going along fairly smoothly as each side's now begin to bring their forces down to the levels which kick in February of 2018. Missile defense has been an interesting question because in early 2011, there were technical conversations between the U.S. Department of Defense and the Russian Ministry of Defense where reportedly they found a lot of convergence in thinking about what a cooperative NATO-Russia missile defense system would look like. They agreed, for example, that each side would retain control over a decision to launch an interceptor missile and be responsible for defending its own space. But they also agreed that there'd be a lot of transparency. There would be jointly manned centers, one center which was called a data fusion center, where you would take information from American radars and satellites and NATO radars and satellites, and then take similar information from their Russian counterparts, combine it in a jointly manned center, then send that back to both sides. So you'd have enhanced data and a better picture of the missile defense environment around Europe. A second center that's been discussed, an operations and planning center, would talk about how these centers, how US and NATO and Russia would work together in terms of a cooperative missile defense. So there was a lot of work going on at that level, but the Russians in the spring of 2011 began to say that before they could go to a cooperative missile defense, they needed a legal guarantee from the United States that American missile defense systems would not be targeted against Russian strategic forces. The Obama administration and NATO are prepared to make a political commitment in that regard, but a legal guarantee here in the United States would require consent from the Senate to ratification because you'd be talking about a treaty. And the sentiments in the Senate right now about missile defense are so strongly held, it's really impossible to see the Senate doing that. So one of the things that would be important, I think, to moving forward on missile defense would be presumably after the election, whether the Russians were prepared to move away from that request for a legal guarantee and accept a less binding political assurance. I think the Russians, and you were hearing this from Russian officials as early as spring 2011, where they were saying they were not prepared to move in further nuclear reductions or further negotiations beyond New START until 2013 because they wanted to know who was going to be the American president in 2013. And my guess is that that came from a Russian calculation that if there was a Republican in the White House, there could be a very different American approach to arms control. So Moscow is reluctant to invest much in 2011 and 2012, given the possibility that there might be a change of course here. So my sense is both on further nuclear reductions, but also on related issues such as missile defense, the Russians have been in a holding pattern, and we'll see what kind of approach they take in 2013 after they see who Mr. Putin's opposite number is going to be.